Okay, good afternoon. Just welcome all of you and thanking you for being here today, Tuesday, January the 29th at 4 o'clock. And we are in person at the James River Boardroom. And so as we look at our agenda today, certification of quorum, all of the nominating committee is here. So I can tell you, Madam Secretary, we have a quorum. And first on the agenda is consideration of amendments to the meeting agenda. So are there any amendments or revisions to this meeting agenda? Not. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion, I guess, to approve the agenda. Is that what you want? Yeah.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, there's no opposition. So we will move on to item 2, which is approval of the CVTA nominating committee, May 25th, 2021 action meeting minutes. And in those minutes, it shows, we don't have those. Okay,
Just
we had that in
I
our,
would refer those to our next meeting.
absolutely. And those, excuse me, some of those minutes were used during our CVTA meeting on last week. So so we will defer that until our next meeting, if we have a next meeting. Item 3 is our public comment period. Has anyone called, emailed?
Have not received any comments.
Okay, so we will close the public comment period. And now we come to the CVTA nominating committee. And my report is that we did indeed did our due diligence. We our nominees for the full body, as well as a recommendation to allow this nominating committee to choose the other 2 slots in the finance committee. The amendment was moved and it was second. And so today we are tasked with 2 positions with Central Virginia Transportation Finance Committee and nominating 2 persons for that position. And so I just stated our charge. That's what we're here to do, is to nominate 2 persons for the Finance Committee. And then it becomes the responsibility of the Finance Committee to elect their own chair and vice chair of finance. And so you all have a draft of the bylaws, and these are the amended and approved bylaws that was accepted at our meeting on last week in front of you. So Article 3, thank you, which is nominating committee. And it states in paragraph C that the nominating committee at a regular meeting held preceding the annual organizational meeting at which the election of officers will be held, the chair shall appoint a nominating committee subject to the approval of the authority. At the annual organization meeting, the nominating committee shall submit the name or names of 1 or more persons for the offices of chair and vice chair, and for the 2 finance committee members appointed by the authority. Additional nominations may be made by any member at the annual meeting. So that is our task before us today. And so following that, item 6 is a consideration of nominees for the Central Virginia Transportation Finance Committee. And the floor is open for discussion. Okay, well, let me continue. I will tell you that as I did before when we nominated the chair and the vice chair. I called and I spoke to both gentlemen. Well, I have done the same thing with the two positions in the finance committee. So I have spoken to Mr. Brown, and I have also spoken to Mr. Peterson, who holds those positions. Both men have said that for them, it is for whatever is for the betterment of this organization. I told both of them there's a possibility that you will not be renominated. And with both of them, they were in agreement of their position. So just wanted to make it clear that I have spoken to Mr. Peterson and Mr. Brown about the possibility of them not being renominated. So after that statement, do we have any discussion or any nominations? Okay.
I'm prepared to make remarks if someone's prepared to make a motion.
Well, I don't know that, I guess the real
We just
question
need to
right
discuss
now
it.
is we had a discussion earlier on about not changing vote in any of the positions in the main CVTA. I think the discussion here before making nominations is we want to do that, or are there other factors that should be considered besides that with on the finance committee?
I think there are two factors. One, I recall from the discussions that we had when we originally formed, a concern that since the three of the five members of the finance committee are the large community, and they're on permanently, they're representative, and they have veto power in essence over whatever the CVTA does. The concern was about smaller jurisdictions and their representation. I think there is value in having, now that our Mr. Brown, our Commonwealth Transportation Board representative, has got us up and going. He certainly has done, he has been consistent in promoting the development of this authority and seeing it through, and he has got us up and running. But it would seem that as we've got our legs, so to speak, that we would want to ensure that all the communities feel represented on the finance committee. Particularly, I'm speaking from the perspective of the fall line, which is, I think, a project that has a lot of support in the region, but does not immediately affect about 5 jurisdictions, all of which are smaller. So having a representative of the smaller jurisdictions on the finance committee would hopefully offer some assurance that if the smaller jurisdictions that aren't affected by the fall line trail, assurance that their concerns will be addressed if the fall line trail is indeed the project that the CVTA decides to pursue. And so from that perspective, without getting into who it is, I think there's value in having a representative from the smaller group.
Actually, though, we have 5 jurisdictions that will be affected by it, only 4 that will not be affected.
Only
by the
4, okay.
because the city, Chesterfield, Henrico, Hanover, and
I
Nashville.
stand
are all-
corrected. You're right.
So taking the fall line out of it, I would say that if we'll be looking at that, we have to look at the other 4 jurisdictions as the point to represent those not affected by the fall line, which would be Powhatan, Kent, Goochland, and Charles City.
Right. Sitting here looking at them.
Yeah.
Somehow I get
I
confused.
can't see him. I don't have eyes.
Well, Hopewell and Petersburg are in the mix too, so anyway.
Absolutely.
So that's just a general statement without getting into who the candidates are.
I can see value in that.
I heard your statement, Mr. Peterson, that we made about, it was made about the consistency for another year. And I understand that statement. However, when that statement was made, we were selecting for the full body versus a subcommittee or committee on it. And so I have to say, of course, coming from a smaller jurisdiction or locality, I do think that it's important that not only the locality that I represent feel as though they have a voice at the table, but I think that that it will, I don't want to say it will increase the comfort level, but I think that knowing that there are only two positions that would ever change. I mean, the faces can change, but the positions won't change. Unless there's something astronomical going on with the census that we don't know yet. And so that's why this conversation is going on now. However, I work in pleasure of this board.
Your thoughts, Mr. Williams?
Nova, being as you're on the finance committee, I'd like to know what your feelings are in terms of, let me go back. You're very familiar with the finance committee because it's been charged with. Do you see a positive to the small jurisdiction be included? Or how do you think it's worked out this past year without a small jurisdiction on the finance committee?
I think it's worked very well this past year in the sense of it's been organizational. As we go forward, I think things are going to be a little different. I think that there's going to be, as we become organized, then we're going to be more focused, not just on the processes and all that we were trying to set up now, and more into the details of the day-to-day facts of the different things we're going to be doing regionally and what have you. So I don't think looking at just this first year is valid to say that's because that worked well, isn't it? It means that it needs to stay that way, because I think we're going to be constantly changing going forward.
But again, you said going forward, what do you see in terms of the
I
value?
think
or-
I can certainly agree with both Ms. Page and Mr. Hodges that small jurisdictions need to be represented in the full body and in the full actions of the CVTA.
Thank you.
Is that where you are? I mean, I feel like we've not forgotten that there are small jurisdictions, but there are no small jurisdictions. Hanover County is the smallest jurisdiction on the finance committee. And traditionally, we've referred to the city, Chesterfield and Henrico and Hanover as the big four. We're definitely the little brother of that group, the smallest, but we do have both the traits and characteristics of both the small jurisdictions and the big ones. Mm-hmm. So we're sort of there straddling the line. But as it is right now, the pure smaller jurisdictions are not there. Y'all have made a good case that they should be. And so I don't have a problem with that at all. I sort of feel that we need to make sure that small jurisdictions' voice is heard.
Mrs. Page.
Nobody can hear what you're nodding.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate all of your comments. That's very helpful. Thank you.
I just wanted to offer that you did a really good job of going back to the bylaws and highlighting the charge of this committee and changes that have been made. I also thought maybe the committee might like to look at page 7 of the bylaws where the charge for the finance committee is outlined, because that might be useful to the discussion and really thinking about how the question of representation factors into the actual role that's been set for the committee.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And it's in Article 5, Section B, Finance Committee. And so, want me to read it?
Well,
I guess
I guess
because
for the
we're
benefit of
doing
those that are listening at home.
absolutely. So the charge that this committee shall be responsible for advising the authority on all financial matters, overseeing financial activities undertaken by the authority. This includes reviewing, commenting on, and recommending the annual budget and adjustments to the budget, reviewing annual revenue estimates, recommending the authority's financial policies, which includes the bond investment, procurement, risk management, and small purchases, and making recommendations on those, monitoring the authority's compliance with the fiscal policies and procedures, reviewing GRTCs or its successors, expenditure of funds received through the authority on a quarterly basis. You'll be reviewing each locality's expenditure of funds received through the authority on a quarterly basis, reviewing the financial statements, and working with the auditor of public accounts or its legal authorized representatives in performing an annual audit of financial accounts of the authority. So that is the charge of it. And in reading the charge of it, it becomes that all of those procedures, policies and procedures in place, and if so, do you think it would be to the betterment of Central Virginia Transportation Authority for the current members to carry out this charge? And with the charge being written, what do you think the influence or the difference would be with another locality being nominated for this year or possibly in years to come? I guess this year, that's what we're working on.
Well, looking at the charge, I mean, I think the key charge is item 8, is the budget issues. And because the budget effectively for the CVTA that the Finance Committee is going to be reviewing primarily includes the operating budget for the CVTA and the 35% regional dispersion of the 35% regional funding. The 50% funding is going to be done locally. The 15% is automatically going to GRTC. But that's a significant budget that we're dealing with, the 35% plus the overhead and operation. So that's where, and from what I'm hearing on the committee here, is that there is a desire for small jurisdictions to have a voice in that discussion. Am I hearing, and I heard correctly?
Yes.
That being the case, and I agree with that. And so I think we can take care of one, if we're on agreement with that, I think we could probably take care of one of those positions fairly quickly by looking at those jurisdictions. And if you'd like, I would be more than happy to, I had only had a casual discussion of this, to nominate Patricia Page for that position. For one of the two.
I would second that.
Okay, it's been, can I have this? If I can-
I would suggest you abstain from the vote. You can administer the
Okay.
election.
And so we've had,
And
And I
and now,
would like
unless you want to have a discussion and say, oh, no.
And I have some comments.
yes, Mr. Hart.
I've already said, and I think rereading the charge, the focus is the Finance Committee advising the authority on all financial matters and overseeing the financial matters. So it gets to the concern I have that localities that maybe are not the permanent members being represented on the Finance Committee, so their perspective is articulated. So that reinforces it. And then I seconded the motion Mr. Peterson made. In this page, I think she would bring not only the perspective of a smaller jurisdiction, but also would address Delegate McQuinn's concern that diversity be important to this organization. And I think gender diversity is important, and should she be selected, she would meet that criteria very well and help keep us a diverse candidate.
I'll add to that, her military background has given her a lot of strength and leadership abilities that I've learned to respect it very much.
Any other comments, suggestions, nominations? No. So we've had a motion and a second. We've had discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
All right,
Opposition? So the motion carried.
You abstain.
Oh, and I abstain from voting.
Let the record.
For the record, I abstain from voting.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a second position, and we will entertain a nomination for that position as well.
Any discussion comes down to whether the CTV is a valuable, how valuable that is to that organization.
I would say the CTV is invaluable, and having that expertise is integral to the CVTA. The question is the Finance Committee that's advising on financial matters. I can see and Mr. Brown has done a wonderful job, and he would continue to be on the authority. The issue is the monitoring of the financial act or overseeing. Is that the best expenditure of his time and expertise being on call it an operating committee, as opposed to his role in advising us on policy? That's just a thought. I already feel like I've said too much.
no,
Mr. Williams, do you have any comments?
not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Peterson?
I don't think I'm in the proper position to make anything about it.
I will say this. I think we've been well served by the two incumbents that are on the committee.
Absolutely.
I applaud both of them for their work. Fortunately, we're in a situation now where we're trying to make a determination which of the two are going to continue. And if you think that's easy, it isn't. It's very difficult.
And as Ms. Page indicated, we have been in contact with Mr. Brown, and he was aware that the nominating committee might not select him, and I understand he accept that.
Absolutely. And so that I can make the statement, it is in no way, in my statement, it is no way being anything than appreciative of, of Mr. Brown as well as Mr. Peterson to go through this first year of organization and using their expertise, which regardless to who stays, I will need desperately. So I can put that right out there. But I think that knowing both gentlemen, I do believe that, and surely Mr. Brown has demonstrated that by his efforts to even form this authority. So I have sit in a lot of TPO meetings and heard the need for an authority in this area. And I think that he has worked diligently and successfully to bring this to fruition. I think that either gentleman, whether they remain on the finance committee this year or the upcoming year or not, will be available for the history or for their insight, because as we stated before, the finance committee, regardless of their decisions, they still only making recommendations to the authority.
John, what would be your preference?
My preference would be for Mr. Peterson.
I guess it's because Mr. Peterson asking him his feelings about remaining on the finance committee as well.
Mr. Brown, Mr. Peterson, either one of us are going to be here for whatever we're needed, wherever we're needed, I firmly believe. And we're both for whatever's best for the organization. Nobody's going to have hurt feelings.
I think if you've got one recommendation.
I think the important thing was the fact that we getting a small jurisdiction represented.
I'm not sure we'd be meeting our charge if we said either one of the incumbents to fill the other position and let the full body decide. I think it's incumbent on us to make a recommendation. The full committee will do what's appropriate, but I think they're looking to us to make a recommendation.
Absolutely. And so Mr. Hodges has made the nomination for Mr. Peterson to serve on the
That was one way to
finance
get a
committee.
motion.
So do we have a second?
And Mr. Peterson's not a part of this discussion.
Well, given the comments I've heard from the chair and from John just now, taking the temperature here at the table, it feels like there's a consensus that the second person should be Mr. Peterson. So I will second the motion.
Thank you. So it has been moved and second that our second nominee will be Cordova Peterson to serve on the finance committee. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposition has the same opportunity.
I abstain.
And one abstain. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So we will go to the full body in that meeting with our recommendations. And surely, as we read in Article 3, if the full body has, they have the right and the privilege to, if they have other nominees, to surely express their nominees, and not only for the finance, but for the full body. And I think that we have completed our task that was laid before us by our recommendations of chair of the full body to remain with Mr. Oh my God. with our chair and vice chair to remain in place, and also with Mr. Peterson and myself to serve or nominees for the finance committee. Yes, sir.
I would hope that this committee would, in its recommendation, that it would be clear that we are in no way, or we are commending Mr. Brown for his service and his authorship, really, of this the CVTA. But we see that we are evolving to a working authority and see a need which we're recommending be addressed. Or words to that effect.
Yes, sir. And I made up.
Praise well deserved.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it should be clear that nothing negative is intended by not recommending the appointment. It's more organizational strength that we're hoping to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure Chet will figure out best words. Maybe
You said it
Nicole.
very well.
Between the
Yeah.
scratching from that poison ivy.
Okay. And so our nominees for our upcoming year will be Mr. Frank Thornton as chair and Mr. Kevin Carroll as vice chair of the authority. And then our present members from the larger jurisdiction, from the larger localities, and to further nominate Mr. Peterson and myself for finance. And then we will open the floor for other possible nominations. With the clear and concise expression of gratitude and appreciation and acknowledging all that Mr. Brown has done thus far with this body. Absolutely. Any of,
I'll just, if I could just play out from a logistical standpoint, the July meeting is scheduled for the 16th. Of course, this will be a pretty significant component of that agenda, the election of the chair and the vice chair, and the selection of the two committee members. The intention would be that we would convene the finance committee probably immediately following the general authority meeting, so that the finance committee can then organize itself to select its chair and vice chair, so that we can be expeditiously moving forward. As you know, we've had a little bit of some changes of dates of our normal schedule in July and August, and so we're still working on August, but we want to make sure that we leave July 16th with a clear sense of what that schedule will be. So just wanted to give you all that. I know it's one step removed, but a little bit of just kind of logistical information for how we're expecting the flow of the meetings to go, so that number one, we know what the structure will be, but number two, everybody will have a chance to be witness to that, so that similar to last year, so that when you leave, or if you have to leave early, that's fine too, but we'll have that resolved before we move too far into the future meetings.
absolutely.
I might suggest it might be very appropriate that all members of the full CVTA be given minutes immediately of this meeting, so that they're not hearing
Agreed.
what it is
Absolutely.
at the day of the meeting.
We could transmit a memo, I think, summarizing the actions and the discussion of the committee,
That'd
and
be
maybe
good.
the sentiments as well,
Absolutely.
and transmit that in advance of the packet going out.
Please include in that the praise for Mr. Brown.
We can work with Madam Chair to
Okay, clear and concise.
But the appreciation that it's fully expressed. here,
Absolutely.
that I think by everybody.
Any other comments? We all legal?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're gonna check that one. So here are no other comments. At this time, we will stand in adjournment.